Many people regard you as a personification of Ubuntu. What do you understand Ubuntu to be?
In the old days when we were young, a traveler through a country would stop at a village and he didn't have to ask for food or for water. Once he stops, the people give him food, entertain him. That is one aspect of Ubuntu, but it will have various aspects. Ubuntu does not mean that people should not enrich themselves. The question, therefore, is, are you going to do so in order to enable the community around you to be able to improve? These are the important things in life. And if one can do that, you have done something very important which will be appreciated.
The open source report on the 9th of October 2018 from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. This is our technical part of the Boston Red Network, and we are an open source advocate and propagandist, etc. Get my voice back here, but nonetheless, excuse me, from the Jerry Pippin broadcast booth, we go at you. We apologize for not having more open source reports. This report has been on the what used to be the proverbial cutting table, but on the table for a few weeks now, but nonetheless we finally have it out. A little editorial comment here. We normally just title these reports the open source report and the date. This report, the title will be Linus Torvalds, and the reason for that is the action taken by the handlers, the Linux Foundation, on the issue of Linus Torvalds and his conduct. We'll get to that in a minute. Firstly, we'll go to the kernel as we normally do, and of course the kernel is copyrighted by none other than Mr. Torvalds himself. The stable kernel is at 4.18.21. We use the Slackware kernel, the latest one out. Let's see, we are using 4.14.72 or 73. It says 74 here, but it should be coming along shortly, as they say, as things normally do. Let's get some of the extra business out. Windows 10 has been deleting files, so if you are a customer of Windows 10, there are problems with the latest update. In early October, around October the 2nd here, we see some emails. This is from TNW. Someone had their documents folder deleted, so if you are updating and you need to back up your files to something like the Google Drive or whatever, period. For a monthly fee, businesses are able to map, I see, the provincial location, and anyway, oops, sorry about this, I was going into IBM here, but Google and Drive One and Dropbox are just an alternative drive. Hard drives are very inexpensive these days. Let me move on from that. What I had started reading here inadvertently was IBM launches tool to help grocery stores track food on a blockchain. Blockchain is becoming a very big item. I think we'll just touch this while we're here. IBM just rolled out some new blockchain software. The global technology giant launched IBM Food Trust, a new software suite built for tracking food supply routes with distributed ledgers. IBM Food Trust is the newest contribution to the blockchain ecosystem. It pledges to connect growers, processors, wholesalers, distributors, and retailers, and others to a permissioned, immutable, and a shared database. So this is what blockchain is all about. For a monthly fee, businesses will be able to do the mapping. The fee will depend on the business, from $110 to $11,000 per month to use the Food Trust. IBM claims the new platform can even support companies with $1 billion annual income. ZNet reported that Carrefour is converting more than 12,000 stores in 33 countries to the IBM food distribution ecosystem. Companies also can pay a one-time fee of $5,500 to receive expert onboarding from IBM. So in other words, IBM Global Services is sort of hit out here. It remains to be seen if the Food Trust can truly support such large operations. After all, the likes of Amazon, Google, and Microsoft to compete with. So it's some of what came flying out here. To Google Plus, a flaw that has been in Google Plus for a very long time, and the company can't fix it, or they're not bothering to fix it. Google Plus's numbers have been disappointing, so therefore they are letting Google Plus die on the vine. 500,000 accounts, 500,000 have been affected, and the data exposed could potentially include things such as name, occupation, and age, but not phone numbers, any information stored on your Google account. Also, Smith is adamant the project found no evidence that the bug was abused, or even that the developers using the API were aware of its existence. Many of these things happen to be out here, so we felt we would bring this item up here. And before we get to Linus Torvalds, we will get to him. 5 reasons to choose the Google Pixel 3 over the iPhone and a Galaxy phone. I had an associate that had the Pixel 2. I was impressed with it. On October 9th, that will be today, I believe, will unveil its next generation flagship smartphone, likely to be called the Pixel 3 and Pixel 3 XL. For example, previous leaks have demonstrated wireless charging. That's a first for the Pixel devices, and there will be a notch on the larger Pixel 3 based off of what we already know. Google's approach to the Pixel line. Below are 5 reasons you should buy it, and the site goes. The Pixel camera. Now, that's an interesting camera. Incidentally, we don't sell Pixels. Google does. With every new smartphone cycle, the camera is one area that improves nearly across the board. Sometimes it's a smaller tweets with as Samsung's Galaxy phones. Other times there are big steps, as in the case of the iPhone XS. In 2 short years, Google has produced what's arguably the best smartphone camera on the market. It's done it by using one camera. Many phones, incidentally, use 2 cameras. Some reviews. This is ZNet, incidentally. Unlimited photo backup. They've had this for years. They will back it to the cloud for free. It offers free unlimited backup for optimized versions of your video. The purest Android. Lots of fuss being made about Android and customization that companies like Samsung make with it. With the Pixel line, Google takes a pure Android and makes subtle tweaks, mostly to the launcher, to provide a more pixel-like experience. So you get monthly security updates, which is good. And the pricing, they don't know what the pricing will be, but the other devices are around $1,000. We'll assume it will be about the same. We just, of course, don't know. Anyway, that's the latest there. We're just kind of moving around here. Facebook's portal video calling a device. Evidently, Facebook is hawking a device that you can use, according to Facebook, will make you feel there with a voice interface, a 10-inch 12 by 80 display. Will run about, the portal will run about $200. The portal Plus will run $340. Pre-orders are available on Amazon, Facebook, and other outlets. CNET noted many of the Facebook trust issues, but buying a device on a portal really comes down to weighing the social network's motivation as well as the overall return to you. The launch statement includes much about privacy and security. That is, like the company's basically saying, we know we are trying to earn your trust. Well, the question here is, do you really need a device? Facebook's biggest problem with a portal, which on the surface looks like a fine device, is that many folks are trying to curb usage of social network. That is true. People are deactivating their accounts, trying to be on social network later. That's something we'll be watching in the coming days. From Wire Magazine, more about Google privacy whiplash. It shows big tech inherent problems. This is Google. It announced that was on a Monday. We're now on Tuesday morning. Social network followed. This came from the Wall Street Journal, but the company didn't disclose the recently discovered bug that exposed data, but we call it big data, since 2015. That is one of the problems with many of these social networks, that there are bugs there, but they never talk about. Behemoths like Google and Facebook have lately grappled with how to reconcile their competitive priorities of safeguarding users' trust and turning a hefty profit. Well, that's always a problem. The Google miners, the vulnerability in Google, which the company discovered and remediated in March, specifically related to one of the services programming interfaces for third-party developers to access user profiles. Google said that the bug exposed the data like usernames, addresses, occupations, gender, and ages, but the company found no evidence that anyone exploited to steal data or misuse the data in any of the 438 applications that might use the API. We had some problems with Google and their API on our website. Getting to update it. A lot of hoops to go through that are not announced. Google further announced on Monday that all third-party applications, including mobile apps that access sensible Gmail APIs, will need to submit through a thorough review as part of an expanded protection. This is what, with us, but doesn't make any sense. We'll employ an independent auditing firm to complete the reviews and will charge developers $15,000 to $75,000 to have it done. A little different situation there, obviously. Google has apparently worked on these preventive steps for months, independent of Google+. I think the new announcement could be a positive step. And that is from Mark Rottenberg. He's president of the Electronic Privacy Information Center. I think we've passed the point where Google should get to decide if Google has done enough to address the problem. No doubt about that. And in comes the feds in this situation. I'm sure Google weighed the possible risks and benefits to legal liability, policy goals, reputation, user trust, and I think that people will be watching closely to see how these incidents play out for the press, public, and policy. That is from Tiffany Lai, a resident fellow at the Yale University Law School's Information Society project. So I thought we'd bring that out to keep people constantly informed. Another issue here, Foxfire is to support what's called Google's WebP image format of a faster web. Apple Safari is the only major holdout there, and I just felt we would just briefly touch on this. They had put it in there. Foxfire has joined Google's WebP party, another endorsement for the Internet's giant effort to speed up the web with better image format. Yeah, since it's been built into Chrome, but Chrome's runs so slow. Android software and many of its online properties in effort to put websites on a diet and cut network data usage, but Google has had trouble encouraging other people to join them. So it would work with JPEGs and other things. It's a serious... It seriously evaluates WebP, but chose to try to squeeze out more JPEGs. Now, Mozilla, like Microsoft with its Edge browser this week, have changed hearts. I didn't know Edge. Don't use Edge. I don't know very many people that use Edge, but Edge is supposedly a much better browser than what Microsoft used to have. Is a major backer of another format under development, AVIF, where WebP is based on Google's VP8 video capture technology. AVIF is based upon newer video formats called AVI. For a much broader group, the Alliance for Open Media. The alliance includes a lot of heavy hitters: Apple, Google, Microsoft, Cisco, Netflix, and Facebook. So they're working on a new format there. So this is basically it. We're really rolling through some things that we had been keeping around for quite some time. From the Creative Commons, which we use their license, the new NAFTA, this is the Canadian copyright reform and shrinks the public domain. This is on the 1st of October. The U.S., Canada, and Mexico reached an agreement on a new so-called North American Free Trade Agreement, rebranded the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement, obligates Canada to increase its copyright terms by an additional 20 years. Canada currently observes the minimum term of copyright as required by the Berne Convention, which is life of the author plus 50 years. The new agreement will require all signatories to agree to a term of at least the life of the owner plus 70 years. The extension already lengthens the copyright terms will discourage a new creativity in Canada. And that's the whole idea behind it. Creativity always builds upon the past. The public domain is our shared cultural commons used to create new works of art and science. Like a sedimentary rock, the commons in the Creative Commons started with the public domain, and fulfilling our mission to protect and expand the public domain is why we develop tools to better mark and dedicate content to the public domain. We continue to advocate for change to copyright policy that promote a robust and accessible public domain. So these are some of the things. I won't get all of this. I'll put this up on. our websites. Bernard Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web, now has a new Berners-Lee, a new mission. It's called Solid. It was created by him. And if you go to the Cranston Facebook page, you can find it there, Reshape the Web. As we know it, Solid will foster a new breed of applications with the capability above and beyond anything that exists today. And there is a website, and we will place a link to it. The Fast Company had an interview with Tim Berners-Lee telling us that his radical new plan to upend the World Wide Web. Last week, the inventor of the World Wide Web asked me to come and see a project he's working on almost as long as the web itself. It's a crisp autumn day in Boston. Berners-Lee worked out of an office above a boxing gym. I spent a little time around boxing gyms. After politely offered me a cup of coffee, let me into a sparse conference room. At one end of a long table is a battery laptop covered with stickers. Here on this computer, he's working on plans to radically alter the web. The intent is world domination, Berners-Lee said, with a wicked smile. A British-born scientist known for his dry sense of humor, no doubt about that. This week, Berners-Lee will launch Interrupt, a startup that has been building its stealth model for the past 9 months, backed by Glassing Ventures. Its mission is to turbocharge a broader movement afoot amongst developers around the world to decentralize the web and to take back the power from forces that have profited from centralizing it. In other words, it's game on for Facebook, Microsoft, and Amazon. For years, Berners-Lee has and others internet activists have been dreaming of a digital utopia, and this is part of our mission. Remain free and open. Berners-Lee, the time of dreaming, is over. We have to do it now, he said, displaying an intensity and urgency that is uncharacteristic of his soft-spoken academic manner. At Netscape for today's internet, if all goes as planned, Interrupt will be to Solid what Netscape wants us for many user member Netscape, users of the web, an easy way in. Like with Netscape, Berners-Lee Interrupt will just be the first of many companies to emerge from Solid. And we have the Solid website up, a new revolution for developers. We remember not only Netscape, for those old-timers, go back to Mosaic. They came out of the University of Illinois at Irvine. And Mr. Andrews, one of the developers of Netscape, is now in the venture capital business as a multimillionaire. The developers have always held a certain amount of revolutionary spirit, he observed. Circumventing government spies or corporate overlords may be an initial lure of Solid. So I'm just sort of going through this interview here. I will attach this to it, and we'll go on. Now to our subject matter here, the infamous Linus Torvalds. The article came out in the New Yorker. You know who he is. Emails of the celebrated program, Linus Torvalds, land like thunderbolts from the high into the public lists, full of invective and insults and demeaning language. Please just kill yourself. This world would be better place, he wrote in one. Guys, this is not, well, I won't say what it is, contest, penis sucking contest, he observed, and shut the up, and another one there. This is not a way to carry on in a public forum in 2018. It wouldn't have been a way to carry on in 1918. Torvalds has publicly posted thousands of scathing messages targeting programmers who submit what he deems flawed code to the Linux computer operating system, the kernel, which has brought to life more than 25 years ago, and now administers a collaborative open source project. Today, the Linux kernel is famous, running in enormous computers of Google, PayPal, Amazon, eBay, and anyone else that's out there, and 2 billion phones with Android, at least for the time being. Torvalds retains a final say over each precious line of code, just as he did when he started out at the University of Helsinki. For years, he's been known as the Linux benevolent dictator for life. Well, on Sunday, the benevolent dictator announced that he would step down temporarily. In other words, he's going to anger management to get some assistance on how to understand people's emotions and respond appropriately. That is an interesting play on words there. Why did he just not say anger management? He's 48 years old, lives outside of Portland, Oregon. I'm very much do want to continue to do this project I've been working on for almost 3 decades, 30 years. He wrote in a post to the Linux kernel list, I want to take a break to get help on how to behave differently and fix some issues in my tooling and workflow. The deputy director there, Gregory Hartman, to run the project while he is away. Well, part of the problem here is old Linus Torvalds works for the, and the other ones also, maintainers for the Linux Foundation, and they're sponsored by Red Hat and these big corporations. And old Linus made over $1 million last year, period. His decision to step down was after the New Yorker asked him a series of questions about his conduct for a story complaining about his abusive behavior, discouraging women from working on the Linux kernel. That will do it. It's a response to the New Yorker. Torvalds said, I'm very proud of the Linux code that I invented and impacted, and it has been all over the world. I'm not, however, always proud of my inability to communicate well with others. This is a lifetime struggle for me, and to anyone who feels I've deeply hurt them, I'm deeply sorry. Not good enough. This is me too. His response was conveyed by the Linux Foundation, which supports Linux and other open source projects, and paid old Torvalds $1.6 million in compensation. That was in 2016. The foundation said that it supports his decision, encourages women to participate, but has little control over Torvalds, running the coding process. We're able to have various degrees of impact on these outcomes in newer projects, the statement said. Older and more established efforts like a Linux kernel are more challenging to influence. Not really. Just cut off the damn money. Until the weekend, Torvalds not only defended his aggressive behavior, but insisted that it contributed to a Linux runaway success. He should have been there with Justice Kavanaugh. If you want me to act professional, I can tell you I'm not interested, he wrote in 2013 in response to a prominent Linux contributor, Sage Sharp, who demanded on a public email that Torvalds stop using physical intimidation, verbal threats, and verbal abuse in his emails. I'm sitting in my home office wearing, well, give a damn what he's wearing, his bathrobe. He almost committed it anyway, and said probably what he's doing. Although the distribution, distributes its product. For free. The Linux project has grown to resemble a blue chip tech company, normally a voluntary enterprise like Wikipedia. Linux, in fact, is primarily sustained by funds and programmers from large tech companies, as we lamented there. Intel, Google, IBM, Samsung, and other companies assign programmers to help improve the code and also to try to influence it. Of the 80,000 fixes and improvements to Linux made in the past year, more than 90% were produced by paid programmers. That's what the foundation reported. Intel workers alone were responsible for 13% of them. The same companies and others, the foundations are roughly, and I didn't know they had this, a $50 million annual budget. That's the Linux Foundation. Linux elite developers, who are overwhelmingly male, tend to share their leaders' aggressive self-confidence. There are very few women amongst the public contributors. And thus, the foundation and researchers estimate that roughly 10% of all Linux coders are women. I doubt that, but everyone is in tech knows about it. But Linux got a pass. That's from Meg Squires, a computer science professor at Elon University, told me, referring to his abusive behavior. Well, no more passes for old Linus. Period. It's the jig is up. Research projects is Squire emailed Torvalds to train a computer to recognize insults, according to Squire's tabulation there. In 2013, Sharp, who is non-binary, uses they and them pronouns, confronted Torvalds on his home turf, the public Linux mailing list. Sharp described Torvalds as one of the worst offenders when it comes to verbally abusing people and publicly tearing their emotions apart. Well, he won't be tearing anybody's emotions apart. Sharp, who grew up in a small Oregon town, was in her late 20s and was an important administrator of the Linux kernel. People assume I was the CI woman in tech. I received a lot of harassment because of it. Sharp tried to appeal to Torvalds on practical grounds. I was asking if she should have sued him. Torvalds replied that the stakes were too high to care about politeness. Faulty code could cascade efforts, requiring large amounts of work from other developers to correct. Speed and accuracy were paramount. And we won't get into all this nonsense here. And some other people here, how they started programming at 6. Let's just wait a minute here. Today, there are 4 women among the roughly 90 Python core developers. This summer, Van Rossum announced that he would be stepping down as Python's benevolent dictator. I'm not going to appoint a successor, he wrote in public emails, of what he called the creative democracy, anarchy, a dictatorship, a federation. Torvalds, by contrast, has long resisted the idea that the Linux programming team needed to become more diverse, just as he restricted calls to tone down his language. Sharp new code of incident. They do have a new code of conduct that was in 2015. Instead, Torvalds accepted a programming fix that provocatively called Code of Conflict. Well, his Code of Conflict is gone. Buried within the list of approved patches was one entitled Code of Conduct Less Revamp. It announced that the Code of Conflict had been replaced by a Code of Conduct that forbids insulting, derogatory comments and behavior considered inappropriate in a professional setting. Complaints will be handled by the Foundation's Technical Advisory Board. This is by Norma Cohen. She's the author of the known it and all the rise of Silicon Valley as a political powerhouse and a social ball. This was in the on September the 10th in the New Yorker. And let me just... Linus and the Linux Code of Conduct. The Linux kernel has been taken over by social justice warriors. That was in, I think, the Wall Street Journal. Since Linus Torvalds announced he was taking time off, he was forced to do it. The Linux Code of Conduct was introduced. There will be endless... endless markers written about boat moves. Marquees. Oh, okay. Anyway, the new is based upon Andrea Colleen Ada, Elke. Contributors code version 1.4 adopted by many open source projects such as Eclipse, Ruby, and Kubernetes. Covenant version, let me get that right. I'll put this on, has spoken out against transphobia. While the code isn't that controversial, which hasn't been seen by some pushing their own agenda. Tech industry is leaving behind women and people of color, as CNET put out there. Torvalds and other senior developers added the CC. No one else did. The Linux Foundation Technical Advisory Board is in charge because they pay the bills. Theodore Ted is a serious Linux developer and Google engineer, explained on the making recommendation decision to act on the recommendations with rest with the maintainers in general and ultimately with Linus. But the problem is with Linus is covered by many laws. MIP2, Linus left and then appointed adopted it to get ahead. The New Yorker article, it played a factor, but having known Linus for 30 years, or Torvalds for 30 years, I doubt it mattered much to him. There's no new news in the article. It's open, and Torvalds' sometimes angry management style has been on display for decades. This is misread here. Added, I'm not emotionally empathetic, a kind of person that probably doesn't come on as a big surprise to most, no doubt. Personally, I think the code of conduct, MIF2, nothing is going to change in and in itself won't make much difference. I believe you can't legislate morals. Who did this? While Torvalds does, when he gets back, will make the difference. He's always set the Linux kernel community tone, and he will again. Well, this is not exactly going to happen that way. In MIP4, Linus won't and can't change. I think he will change in some cases. He will change in cases he wants to get $1 billion. MIP5, a purge of Linux kernel developers has begun. No, there's no sign of that happening. Developers are leaving Linux and taking their code with them. No, they are not leaving. Yes, someone under the nom de plume on conditional witness has never posted to the list before under that name, wrote that people interject from the eject from the Linux kernel community due to the code rescuing their license grant regarding their property via written notice to those who are rescinding grants regarding their code propriety. In other words, they can remove their code from Linux, but no one has been rejected from the Linux community, and no one has removed their code to the best of the knowledge here. Eric Raymond, he's been around a long time, one of the creators of the open source concept, wrote that the Fred has teeth. I researched the Reverend Laura when I was founding the Open Source Initiative. Open Source Initiative is another one of these corporate schemes to get around the open source general license, which we observe, and also liberate software from the Free Software Foundation. There is a law conforming with repudiation of losses relating to conversion of the rights of a contributor to the GPL project, and our judiciable in law. To Mr. Stallman here, who wrote the GPL2 and championed the free software, is purported to have written, developers of Linux or any free software program can remove any and all code at any time without giving a reason. However, this doesn't force others to delete that code from their own version of the program. Heber Mika, a partner in a law firm of O'Lebany and Myers, who specialize in open source software licensing, wrote that copyright ownership in larger projects such as a Linux kernel is complicated. It's like a patchwork quilt. When the developers contribute to the kernel, they do not sign any contribution agreement or assign a copyright. The GPL covers their contribution, and the recipient of the copied software gets a license on the GPL directly from the author. The Linux project uses what's called a developer certificate of origin, which does not grant any copyright license. The contributing individual rights exist side by side with the rights of the project as a whole. Well, we've had a lot of things here. MIP 7, Linus is never coming back. Linus is coming back, that's according to Greg Cornell Hartman, the maintainer and pro-temporary head of the Linux, signed the 4.1.9 release candidate. Now we have a 7 out here, period. If I'm a betting man, I would say he'll be back in a time to manage the next cycle. That'll be 4.20.5 later this fall, or to be terminally precise, October 22nd, when the Linux Kernel Maintainers Summit will be held in Edinburgh, Scotland. Don't know about that one. When all is said and done, and all the hubbub around the code of conduct, Torvalds step out for a while. Linux is being developed, and none of the worst case scenarios have taken place. This is the Maintainers Summit. I guess we'll go to Edinburgh, Scotland. This is a Linux Foundation event on the 22nd of October, International Conference Center there in Edinburgh. This is the Kernel Maintainers Summit. We'll cover this, incidentally. And if we go to the Linux Kernel, let me see, what is this? The Linux Kernel Summit brings together the world's leading kernel developers. Now, this is another summit in Vancouver, Canada, at the Sheridan Vancouver Wall Center. So a number of things are coming up here. We'll, in another report, get to some of these situations here. So we've covered Mr. Torvalds. And let me just switch here and bring up to date Mr. Krebs from the security people. Krebs on security. Supply chain and security is the whole enchilada. But who's willing to pay for it? Well, from time to time, there emerges cyber stories of such prominent impact that they have effect on making other security concerns seem minuscule. By comparison, yesterday was one of those. Bloomberg Business published a bombshell investigation alleging that Chinese cyber spies, I take that with a grain of salt, use a U.S.-based tech firm to seemingly embed tiny computer chips into electronic devices purchased and used by 30 different companies. In the contents of computers, the international security, supply chain security refers to the challenge of validating that a given piece of electronics, or by extension, the software that powers these computing parts, does not include any extensions or fraudulent components. In a nutshell, the Bloomberg article that a San Jose tech giant, Supermicro, was somehow caught up in a plan to quietly insert a rice-sized computer chip into a circuit board. We used to use that circuit board. Used to sell computer supercomputers, specifically their server boards. They did at one time also make them for desktop PCs. To plan and electronic components are purchased by major vendors, allegedly including Apple and Amazon. Supposedly. Needlessly, Bloomberg's reporters write the company denies they are countered by 6 current and former national security officers who, in conversation that began during the Obama administration and continued under DJ Trump, detailed the discovery of the chips and the government's investigation. Today, Supermicro sells more server boards than anyone else. It dominates the $1 billion market. The rest I still know they're there. Hadn't looked at one of their boards for a while, but anyway, all-purpose computers, MRI machines to weapons systems. Its motherboards can be found in made-to-order servers, setups at banks, hedge funds, and cloud computing places, no doubt about that. Has assembly facilities in California, Netherlands, and in Taiwan. It is motherboards as its core product, and nearly all manufacturing contractors in China. So that's Supermicro. And what we're into, revisit Supermicro. Anyway, the U.S. government is eager to admit that there has been a long unofficial inventory of tech components and vendors that are forbidden to buy from. You're in charge of procurement products and service on behalf of the U.S. government. Most of what has been shared is based upon conversations with clueful people, he calls it, over the years, no doubt. And more than a decade ago, I was a reporter with the Washington Post. I heard from an extremely well source that one Chinese tech company had made it into Uncle Sam's entity. Anyway, this kind of goes on and on and on here. Won't get into all of it. Most recently, the Pentagon banned the sale of Chinese-made, ZTE phones. Incidentally, ZTE phone and Huawei phones are very good phones. They banned them on military bases. One of the things you have to worry about is how political it is in terms of slandering the Chinese. One never knows. But the U.S. government does basically the same thing. That's one of the things a little bit hard to take, that they all plan some of the same schemes, I guess. Okay. So in other words, is the whole enchilada. We covered that, and let me just check here. There's been a few things sitting around for a while here. We took care of Mr. Torvalds and his abusive behavior. And let me see if we had been messing around with a we'll probably have to go to the other email server here and wind this up. But nonetheless, this is we won't have time to really cover it, and I believe we've already placed it on another the Kille penetration tools. I think we covered those in another one here. The name of this is WireGuard. This is a VPN. I'm still working on it. A new type of VPN offering, and this is from Arts Technica. This was on in August. It was written. It's been around for a while. And how to do it, we put this on another show, but it's still around, and we would encourage people to look at it and see exactly where it is. You can always go to our Twitter feed, Twitter forward Cranston Software, or our Facebook page is Cranston Software there. As usual, we partner with Cranston Software to do this production. And incidentally, the code of conduct are seen throughout all the meetups. They are pretty much standard to keep the noise down and not turn the meetups into a Fox News channel there, and that's done for political reasons. Now, with old Linus, it was just done because he could get away with it. But the day of him getting away with abusing people and making abusive comments is done. The Software Foundation, a $50 million enterprise, and their sponsors understand this. If he does return, he will have to abide by the code of conduct, or he will be placed on to have a long-time producer. O.T. Leo's free strike rule, and he's on the third strike right now. And the person that wrote the article there, basically saying that little would change, he's an idiot, or whoever wrote the article. That will not happen. I think that was for ZNet. I believe it was for ZNet. Let me just check here. We got rid of it. Anyway, nonetheless, that article has been around for a long time. There's 7 myths. Well, again, what has happened here, the so-called myths have been put into the political world. And for those that watched the Kavanaugh hearings and the fallout, and you have a very polarized, here in the U.S., political climate now, and we do that on Boston Red, part of WBRN Radio also. But if you are listening to any debates, the California governor's debate would be an interesting debate, but you can see where people are polarized, attitudes are polarized. You can just listen at any of the cable stations, how they're going about it. But these struggles are long-term. And women, particularly women and African Americans, we now have African Americans in tech. We have women and girls in tech. These are organizations, and the Good Old Boys Network in Silicon Valley is coming to be more tenuous. Now, is it gone now? No. And part of the problem has been with some women that are in tech have been taking the positions of their tech masters, just as Republican women endorsed Kavanaugh. So the situation is, however, though, when you get this noise very large for corporations, particularly the public corporations that are sponsoring it. Now, the red hats, they work for corporations. The government, that's another problem right there. Because if you start getting these lawsuits springing here, the DJ Trump administration will not be there always. And you have to look at the struggle as we look at it for open source software and open source hardware. It started in the 80s with the Free Software Foundation, and now we've elevated open source up. We got the Linux kernel, all of these projects, some of them unfortunately are under Raymond's semi-open license. And what you're seeing here is corporations trying to run open source. Because if you contribute to code, therefore you run it. But there are enough individuals out there. And with Berners-Lee's new solid program is one of the things that we are seeing that is coming to life. So we need to look to the future of the struggle. And we always begin this project with a report with Ubuntu. And the late President Nelson Mandela explains what Ubuntu is. It's not the Linux distribution. Ubuntu has been around for a very, very long time. But we need to get more Ubuntu into this movement, and we are to keep the independent developers there. And there are hundreds of thousands of them out there. So it's not on Mr. Torvalds. Mr. Torvalds could leave today or disappear from the face of the earth, whichever comes first. Those situations would adjust themselves. People come and people go from projects, etc. And times and struggles change. Now, the Linux program, when Linux first came out, remember Microsoft and all these characters opposed it. Everybody opposed us. And we were selling AMD chips. Anyway, Super Micro boards were Intel boards, the server boards. But they're very good server boards and still are very good server boards. Anyway, so these things come to start to cross our path. They crossed our path in the early 90s when OJ was in jail. So it's kind of a very interesting situation for me to have seen this, and now we are looking at what is transpiring now. We now have blockchain, the same technology that is used in the cyber currency operation, but now it has got more and more types of usages. The Bloomberg people have been using blockchain for a very long time. You can implement this in your personal project or on your small-time server or whatever you want to do, and it will give you better security. No doubt about it. And on our Twitter feed, IBM has some it actually has a little YouTube video telling one how to set up blockchain with the use of the cloud. With some of these things you can do and do inexpensively. You can set it up and you should do that. Kick the tires, drive it around, etc. That's what this open source movement is about. From the Creative Commons we talked about there is to open up education. Wikipedia, the same thing, to hundreds of millions of people that would have not been able to see it. I remember the time when college types and teachers sold Encyclopedia Britannica, World Book. Encyclopedia Britannica, I think, still in business. I'm not sure about World Book. Maybe they are. But that's what they had when I was a child. We had World Book, Encyclopedia Britannica, Funkin' Wagnall, those kind of things. I read those from page to page. And then we got supplements periodically in the year. So we couldn't get updated information. Went to the library in 1,000 different places to get it. At a university, you went to the journals, but the journals, were late. Now a lot of this is instantaneous. I know on the political side, we have studies that are very good studies, and on our econometric side, also very good studies that used to be only available when you were working in a graduate setting on your PhD, perhaps not even master's. So these are some changes that have happened. Nonetheless, this will do it for us. Let me just make sure that my date is correct here. Yeah. We're on the 9th of October, 2018. Have a good weekend. And we will be coming back more. what has happened to us is we obviously people are aware the midterm election is coming up next month, and we've been doing models there, modeling all 435 congressional districts. Many of them don't need the attention because about 90% are a representative will be reelected. The Senate races, so we've been working on that, and we use Audacity. It is open sourced, and we'll try to get these things out semi-monthly, I should say, and eventually we'll do it weekly as we do our This Week in Economics. Good day.